said because you threw so many innings, you threw more innings than you probably ever have, that your offseason might look a little different. How have you tried to stagger your offseason, or have you tried to balance like rest and getting back in it?
Yeah, it's different. Last offseason's approach was, velocity based, because that was the big knock on me for the longest period of time was I don't throw very hard. I still don't throw very hard, but I throw harder than I did. This offseason it wasn't as velocity based. It was more just preparing for a shortened offseason because spring training was coming a month earlier, and like you said, the workload was the highest that it had ever been. But it was just a different approach because I was hoping for different things this offseason than I was the year before.
What do you change in that approach? What were you hoping for this offseason that differs from adding that velocity?
I mean, just the duration of the season kind of got to me in September, I would say, physically as well as mentally. But, I was asking my body to do things in September that it had done all year long, and I just didn't have that same kick. And that's where, this offseason I was kind of preparing for September, and, the expectation being a St. Louis Cardinal is October. So those were the biggest things, like how do I get, 7-8 more weeks out of my body, not only at like the level I was maintaining, but at a higher level, because that time of year is when the most important baseball is being played.
I know we all kind of have a vague idea of how collaborative you've been, at least historically, with your program and stuff and figuring out the physical stuff that works for you. How has that process been like over the last year, dealing with the innings and kind of taking your knowledge base and working it into what they want from you too?
I mean, the approach really hasn't changed, right? Like, I'm a starting pitcher, so the expectation is to go out there and pitch in every game as deep as possible, and that's what, every single time you go out to the mound, you're just trying to get the ball basically to the bullpen to finish, the last 2 or 3 innings of the game. So I don't think anything has really changed. I mean, the duration of the season is definitely longer, and the toll on the body is, a little more, but we're also professional baseball players where we do this every single day for a job, so you just take care of your body a little better, and that's, like I said, that was this offseason and preparing for, hopefully 8 more weeks of high, intensity baseball.
Most baseball players talk about, since they were big enough to pick up a bat or a ball, that the dream was to make it to the major leagues. Now that you're kind of on this precipice, what's the feeling like? What's the feeling inside of you like to know that if you go out and maybe pitch well in spring training, you can be at that level?
As a kid, I didn't really want to play professional baseball, so I'm definitely different than I would say, your average major league player. I kind of wanted to be like an investment banker growing up, so I was definitely a weird kid in that regard, where I played sports because I enjoyed the competition. I love competition, and I still love competition to this day, and that's kind of my issue when I'm not, playing games, is that sometimes, being a little too competitive can be taxing on the people around you just because you can't really do anything for fun. But, I mean, it's just an opportunity to go represent, like I said, the St. Louis Cardinals in the St. Louis area that, I mean, I've been here now for basically 12 hours, and you can just tell it's a baseball town. That's contagious, honestly. As an athlete, you want to go out there and compete for a city that loves the group of guys and loves the game. And, I mean, you couldn't ask for anything more from an organization.
Investment banker, where did that go from?
Yeah, one of my, childhood best friends growing up was like, we're going to be investment bankers, and we're going to go to New York and live that life and work 80 hours a week, 90 hours a week. And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome, so let's do it. And that's kind of like what I'd convinced myself I was going to do for the longest period of time.
Now that career has been put on hold, is your dream when you go to spring training, or not your dream, but your goal is to make the major league roster as a starting pitcher right now?
Yeah, I don't have goals. I don't like that word just because, I feel like the word goal means like if you achieve it, like that's awesome, but if not, like it's okay. So I don't love the word goals. I don't have any goals, don't believe in the word goals, so sorry. The expectation is just go out this season and hopefully help the St. Louis Cardinals win as many games as possible. If that's out of spring training, or if that's in the end of the season when they need me as a fresh arm to come up and whatever. Or maybe they don't need me because they've got 5 really good starting pitchers. That's awesome too. Like, I just want the best thing for this organization, and if I'm one of those pieces, awesome. If not, then I need to go back to work and just get better to help this team win.
When it comes to spring training, getting an on-roster invite, I mean, what is the reaction to that, and just kind of how does your mindset shift towards what that opportunity can mean for you?
I mean, the mindset doesn't really shift because, like I said, it's the same game. Like, it doesn't matter if I'm a non-roster invite or if I'm going back to the guys that I, started with last spring training. The expectation for myself is to go out there and throw as many good innings as I can that day, or what's expected from me. And that's just the same approach this year, that you can't make the game bigger than it is, right? It doesn't matter if you're on the backfield with your rookie ball teammates or if you're in big league camp. You're still a pitcher, you're still throwing the ball 60 feet, 6 inches, and there's still a batter in the box. None of that changes. The batter in the box might be a little bit better, so maybe some adjustments there, but other than that, it's nothing too crazy.
Where are you regarding your offerings right now? Are you doing anything different with your pitch selection and the way that you deliver them, or are you pretty static in terms of that?
I mean, I think everyone's always trying to adjust and get better and learn stuff. This offseason, I think most important thing for me was kind of getting the curveball back. I feel like I lost that in the second half of the season. The shape really started to fall apart on me. And it wasn't until a kid hit a ball like 400 feet off of it that I was like, okay, like this pitch is no longer very good. And it wasn't very good for the rest of the season. So I kind of became a 3-pitch guy. And theoretically, with my fastball shape and like the arsenal that I have, I do need something with a little more depth. So that was the most important thing this offseason, was just like, how do I get back to throwing a curveball that I don't need it to be my best pitch, but I need it to be competitive and usable to get strikes, especially early in counts, so that I don't have to throw, one of my better secondaries or even my fastball as often, just because, you have an offering with a little more depth to it that can also help the fastball up play off of it.
Is this weekend your first time in St. Louis, like ever?
Yeah, first time in St. Louis. I drove by it last year when I was going from, Springfield to Memphis, but I'd never been, in this lovely city.
Did you pull over, like peek at the stadium or no, or is this like your first time in here?
Nope, I drove right by it. I was like, well, there's the arch, there's Bush, and hopefully I'll see it pretty soon.
Why did you drive through here on the way from Springfield to Memphis?
I have no idea. That's just is that wrong? Maybe that's not the right drive I'm thinking of then.
I don't know. Yeah, 45. I can't.
Springfield.
All right, yeah, Peoria, Springfield. My apologies. So yeah, that would have been a crazy drive, actually.
You did a lot of driving last year.
I did do a lot of driving last year.
There about
No.
Country roads, you can drive to Springfield to Memphis directly.
Yeah, okay. No, I must have been Peoria to Springfield. And like I said, those road trips and those hours, I drove home from Memphis. Like I drove a lot of hours
I
last
just
year.
asked him if you said, well, I wanted to see the ballpark, my destination,
Oh no, it was how can I
entails.
get from A to B as quick as possible, unfortunately.
What was
You talked
that?
last year about feeling like you had something to prove, coming in with a chip on your shoulder.
Yeah.
Did you think you did that, and is the chip now off your shoulder?
No, the chip is there. It's new. It's different. The year before it was, well, basically everyone in 2022 passed over me theoretically. So 2023, it was like, all right, that was my senior year. So a new chip there. 2023 happened. I had the year that I had. I get taken where I did, but it was still like, okay, these organizations still passed over me, three or four more times. So that chip's still there. I did what I had to do last year to, maybe prove a couple people wrong. Not everyone, but maybe a couple people. And then September came and just, kicked my teeth in. So it was a new approach, like, okay, you're not that good. So this offseason, it was just a new chip on the shoulder. And that's where, like I said, it's kind of that competitiveness where it makes life really hard when you're always, I'm not going to say like pissed off, but frustrated at yourself just because I didn't end the season as well as I thought I should have. And, going into this offseason, it was a very fresh reminder. It wasn't like it was an old, bad month of May or bad month of June. It was September that I remembered about the season. So like when I think back on my season, it's those last 4 games that, maybe the last one wasn't bad because theoretically it was a quality start, but I still gave up 3 runs in a game that honestly, I think if I make one better pitch, I probably give up 1 run. So it was pretty fresh on the mind that I'm not as good as I think I am and I need to get back to work because clearly I couldn't pitch in the month of September, and that was my only experience with AAA, so it was tough in that regard.
When growing up, obviously you admired inevitably the investment bankers of our country, but at some point, was there a baseball somebody that you started admiring? If so, who was that?
Yeah, John Lester was like the first guy, and that's a controversial name, especially in this city.
He pitched for the Cardinals.
He did, but when I think of him, Cub. Anyways, but so he was like the guy because I think very highly of John Lester, but he wasn't the overpowering guy. He really knew how to pitch and he really knew how to compete, and I was like, all right, like I could be that type of pitcher. Like that's the guy I might be, the guy that's not gonna have the best stuff, but can go out there and give you 6-7 innings and is always gonna go out there and compete, and you know what you're getting from him every time he stepped on the mound. So that was the guy really growing up that I enjoyed watching. And then, as I got older and, John Lester got older and no longer plays baseball, but had a great career. Max Fried was the guy I started, kind of look at too, just because tall, lanky, but he has really good stuff. So I was like, I'll never have that type of stuff, and that's all right. But he was really fun to watch, and he was, he's very good. He still is extremely good, one of the best pitchers in baseball. So those were the 2 guys I can really remember growing up that I enjoyed watching play the game.
Have you ever met Max?
I have not. No, he lived up in the LA area. I'm 2 hours south of that, so no, never crossed paths. No, yeah.
You pitched so many big games at Stanford. Do you think that helped you? Because you talked about you're in single A and not much crowd there, and most of the guys are younger than you. But having pitched so many big games and being that guy to go to, how much do you think that helped you in your career?
The biggest game I probably threw in single A last year, I stunk. It was opening day. I walked 6 guys, so that's great that, that big game experience really paid off last year in low A. But no, I think it's huge, and that's where it's hard to replicate experiences like that. And our Stanford team, gave me as many opportunities as you could ask for as a college baseball player to throw in games that arguably mean more than anything else, which is the postseason, specifically the College World Series. And it's kind of funny, talking to a couple guys, especially I don't know if you guys have Jimmy Crooks in here today or if you guys have had him yet, but we both have very similar memories of the College World Series. And I don't think he had as many traumas as I did because he only had to go there one time, but I had to suck 3 times at the College World Series. So, I'm hoping that, my next experience with, playoff baseball is better just because, I'm older, I'm more experienced and stuff like that, but I definitely have those battle scars that you kind of have to go through just to experience, to learn off of. And, I'm grateful for them, but those are definitely still in the back of the mind when I think about it, and probably still a little bit of that chip.
Quinn, this is such a unique time for the Cardinals because the organization has outright said that this is an opportunity for their younger talent to have an opportunity to run with it. What excites you about that chance, and what do you have to execute, no matter what level you start at, to be a part of that group?
I look at the Detroit Tigers last year. I think the oldest guy on the team was 28 years old. So just because you are with a young core and a young group of guys doesn't mean that the same expectation of winning isn't there. And it excites me in the sense of it just gives me more opportunities, right? If the Cardinals were the franchise that they were, the past 10, 15, 20, 25 years, they'd probably be looking to keep pieces and hold pieces and stuff like that and build a team. And obviously I still think with my abilities, I would be one of those pieces that could come help the team win, but it may just allow me to help the team win sooner. And like I said, talking about experiences and stuff like that, you can't replicate what it's going to feel like for me my first start. You're not going to be able to replicate what it feels like in your 10th start, stuff like that. It may just allow me to get that ball rolling a little sooner that I can help, the St. Louis Cardinals win games as soon as possible.
We've heard a lot about how much they want to make changes in player development and all that stuff. Have you seen that at all this winter, a second winter in the organization? Do you see any differences, anything at all has changed from that perspective?
It's hard to say, to be honest with you. I've been with the org now 2 off seasons, and it's definitely been different. There's a lot of new faces going around. The most important thing for me was the weightlifting aspect, and that progression has stayed pretty similar, which I think is great, because if they just flip something new on us, it might have been a little more challenging during the off season to try and do different stuff, but that's been very consistent for me, and that was probably still my biggest area of focus this off season. But in terms of player development stuff, there's only so much you can do when you're not with people every single day, and that's the toughest part about it is how much can you really do, how much can you oversee during the off season. So I think again we're professional athletes, and we have to take care of our business ourselves, and you can't really put that, in my opinion, on an organization. They can send you as much as they want, but if you're at home not doing anything, not doing the training that you need to be doing, you can't blame them for that. So I guess it's hard for me to answer that question.
Quinn, do you think that the gains you made last winter, you were talking about strength, velocity, but then also the innings that led to, do you think that's the most significant improvement of your career as a pitcher? And did that tell you anything about what's possible year to year?
Again, it's hard for me to say just because baseball had never been my number one priority, which I think is extremely unique when you get to this level. I've always been a academic, scholastic guy first. That's how I was raised. Shout out to my mother. That's what she pushed on my sister and I was, school and academics were the most important thing in our lives. And obviously going to Stanford, it didn't get easier. So while, I'm not saying that other universities don't have a high academic standard, I think Stanford maybe just a touch higher. And again, it was still my number one priority was getting good grades, going to class, probably not getting adequate sleep, the nutritional, all that stuff, you're skipping meals because you got to do other stuff. So it's hard for me to say if the weight training and the weight gaining was the biggest proponent. It definitely helped, don't get me wrong. I obviously got bigger, I got stronger. I focused on velocity for the first time in my life during that off-season training program. But I also got to focus on baseball. I got to go 100% in, which I don't know what value that really brings. It might be 0, and it might just be the weight training and the velocity training, but I also think it could be 50, 60, 70% because it let me go all in on something I'd never been able to go all in on.
Do you think that was the biggest improvement though of your career as a pitcher, just over that time from what you were?
Velocity is really cool, don't get me wrong, it helps. I've seen that firsthand, but it doesn't allow you to be a great pitcher. You can go through the minor leagues at any team, any organization, from the lowest levels. There are guys throwing the ball 100 miles an hour. I'm not saying those guys won't be great pitchers. I hope they're all great pitchers, to be honest with you. Obviously, I hope the best for everyone. But velocity is really cool. It just buys you a little bit of grace, but it doesn't make you a great pitcher. So I think learning how to pitch has probably still been the biggest thing in my career that I've done through high school and college specifically.
So does that give you a sense of where like the next level for you to go is like through that, like learning more about how to pitch?
Yeah, I mean, it's trial by error, unfortunately. So that's where like the velocity will buy you like that little grace. Like you might be able to make a little more error with the extra velocity, but you have to make those mistakes against the best guys to learn off of it. That's the only way you can learn, and that's where, you know, like I said, learning from AAA was, well, I mean, my stuff wasn't the same, but I was trying to force stuff the first 3 outings there and trying to be the guy that I couldn't be at that point in time. And then the 4th outing, I was like, all right, we're just going to have to go out there and pitch today. We've pitched with worse stuff in our careers before. Like, we can't just fall back on that extra stuff not being there today. And I'm just going to have to go out there, make pitches, sequence it a little better, hit some more spots, and do what I can do, but I can't force anything.
When you've like said this over the years, so I apologize, but was there like, as storytellers, we're always trying to find like the moment to describe.
Sure.
Was there a moment when you're like, yep, I can be a professional baseball player. This is my new goal?
No.
Okay.
To be honest with you, no. Just because, I mean, I made that, so like my junior season I thought was really good, right? I was like, okay, I won 9 games, I saved 9 games. I was basically the fireman out of the bullpen, you know, winning a ton. And I was like, okay, like this is as good as I can get, like whatever, I'll have, you know, a great opportunity in professional baseball. And then professional baseball told me pretty politely, like, hey, you're not that good. So I was like, all right, cool. So then, like, my senior year, I was just like, I wasn't even worried about pro ball. I was more worried about just proving people wrong. Like, I was so pissed off and all this stuff. So no, I don't really ever think there's been a moment that I was like, hey, like, I can be a professional baseball player, just because it hasn't been my number one priority. My number one priority has always been just, well, like, proving people wrong and just being kind of pissed off and upset and frustrated. So, no. Yeah.
Quinn, as the season went on, your slider had a little bit less break, but more velocity. Was that an intentional decision, and what went about in that decision-making process?
Yeah, no, that wasn't intentional. Not at first, at least. So what I realized, I think it was in AA. So my stuff had started to change, and it was kind of like a default that I'd had before. So this is where kind of experience had helped me, because my fastball vert started to drop as well in AA, and even we saw that in AAA with like the different baseball and stuff like that, but I fixed it a little bit in AA. But like the vert had started to drop, and so had the arm side run. So what I realized that I started to cut the ball, and like my release axis had changed. So it actually had caused, like, I was getting behind the slider as well. So that had made it harder, obviously, because like if you're getting behind a baseball, you can throw it harder. So like the slider, as you said, like the horizontal break had shrunk, because I think it was like 7 or 8 inches earlier in the year, and it had gone down to like 4. So it was kind of in between like a slider and a cutter at one point. And obviously I'm trying to get it probably in between where it was at the end of the year and the beginning of the year, because I do think the added velocity did help, because you can get under hands on the right-handed batters a lot easier. But at the same time, I don't like really mind the sweep as much, like when it is like the 7 and the 8 against the left-handed hitters. So I'd probably prefer something in the middle of the two. So at first it wasn't intentional, and then I kind of just went with it because I was seeing so much success at the higher level against the right-handed hitters with it.
I'm sure a lot of your teammates are playing video games. Are you sitting around reading investment banking stuff, or what do you do to get away? Because you mentioned the academic side.
Yeah.
You just explained that pretty nicely.
Yeah, I love crypto.
Yeah.
So that's like what I do. Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy world that we live in now, but I love crypto. That's kind of like my pastime, so to say. Like, it's probably what I've been doing the last 6 or 8 or 10, probably a decent chunk of time. Now I've been in and out for like 5 or 6 years. So if anyone here, likes crypto, I'm always open to talk about crypto. But that's kind of what I do for, my free time, my fun. And I also just enjoy hanging out with the people that I enjoy hanging out with and stuff like that.
Derek wants me to ask if you thought about taking your salary in Bitcoin.
To be honest with you, that's funny you say that, because I had a conversation with my mother after the draft, and I was like, hey, like, my mother took my money, by the way, and she put it into safe stuff. She put it into like CDs. But I was like, how mad would you be if I put it in Dogecoin? And she was like, yeah, this is gonna be a short conversation, Quinn. Like, not happening.
Really fucking mad. Right?
Yeah. She was not happy with it. But I mean, that's just where like I said, I'm kind of crazy in that regard, and I love crypto and I just enjoy it. And whether it had made money or not, it still would have been my decision. But like I said, my mom let me take a small chunk and put it in there. But no, it was a pretty short conversation with my mother that was not happening. Bitcoin would be the safest, though. If I was actually going to pull the trigger, it would have been Bitcoin. And I think I probably will end up putting a decent chunk of money into Bitcoin at some point.
Quinn last season, Pipeline and both Baseball America also named you minor league pitcher of the year. Does that help feed that fire or that chip, or does that also give you like that validation that you knew you were better than people were kind of overlooking you in that aspect as well?
I mean, validation is such an interesting topic for me, just because, in my opinion, as a pitcher and as a professional athlete, if you need validation from the outside, you're probably going to struggle, because if you don't have that self-confidence that even after your worst outings, you're still going to be the best guy when you run out there the next time, then you're probably not going to make it in this industry, just because you're going to have a lot of bad outings. I had a lot of bad outings last year. So it's like, it's super cool that people are like, oh, you had a really good year. I'm like, I had 28 starts, and I think at least 10 of them probably weren't very good. So if I didn't have that self-confidence and I needed validation, I think I would struggle more, in the sense of, like I said, you have a really bad outing, you have to go out there the next week. It doesn't matter. Like, no one cares. Nobody cares you had a bad week. No one cares that your stuff's changing, that you can't command stuff. So, I mean, no, it didn't really do much for me. I mean, obviously, I appreciate the accolades, but at the same time, I think as a pitcher too, the accolades are tough for me to, take, because I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the group of catchers and it wasn't for the group of defenders behind me. And that's what I think gets overlooked as a pitcher, is I don't really play defense. Obviously, I think I'm a good defender. I'll make the plays when I need to. But I'm not in this position without the guys making, routine plays as well as the tough plays that maybe some other guys didn't get. And that's why my numbers are what they are, is because I had a great catching group that called good games and blocked and threw out runners and did all that stuff, as well as a defensive unit at all 4 levels that made every play that needed to be made and gave me the opportunity to, win the accolades that I did. So, no, I think it's bittersweet, because I don't think enough guys in our organization get the recognition that they should and deserve that I experienced this year.
You talk about the effect that some of the catchers you pitched to had on you. Where would you rank Jimmy Crooks as in that pantheon of catchers?
Yeah, Jimmy Crooks is dead last. Jimmy's the man, and he's probably, I don't want to rank him, but Jimmy's probably my top guy, and not even from the catching aspect of it. He's obviously a great catcher. I don't need to tell you guys that, but the human being that he is our personalities mesh extremely well, and those are the relationships that, especially as a catcher and a pitcher, sometimes you just don't have it with guys. And for whatever reason, Jimmy and I kind of hit it off from day one, and yeah, he's the man. So think very highly of Jimmy.
You've also known Michael McGreevy for a long time.
Yeah, that's tough.
How, as he's gone up and down through the major, in the major leagues between Memphis and the Cardinals, has he given you any pointers? Have you guys talked about that journey as you prepare to make your major league debut?
Nah, McGreevy and I kind of talk about other stuff. I've known McGreevy forever, like I said, unfortunately. But he's always been the same guy. He's stayed true to himself, and I think that's kind of just the biggest thing I've learned from him, is you just have to stay like who you are as a human being, and you can't really change, and you can't deviate off of what's made you successful at this point just because so-and-so might tell you need to change. And Michael's he's one of the most like detail-oriented probably human beings I've ever met. Like, he does his preparation, he does his recovery, he does everything that he needs to do in order to make his next start. So that's just who McGreevy has been and will always be, and I think that's what has made him so successful, and that's probably what I've learned from him, is just I need to continue being Quinn Matthews, and I don't need to try and be Michael McGreevy.
And then the last thing I have, the baseball. You were talking about the way that baseball's kind of changed throughout the minor league level. Is that almost a fun challenge as you go from level to level, or is it just so frustrating to have to deal with a different baseball built a little different way?
I'll let you know when I have some more outings with the big league ball, but the big league ball, like I said, I don't know if it was the ball, I don't know if I was tired, I don't know if the hitters were better, but the big league baseball, obviously changes from AA to AAA, and clearly I didn't do very well with that big league ball, so let's call it a fun challenge for now, but if I continue to struggle with it, I'm going to call it not a fun challenge, so we can revisit this conversation.
What about the ABS system? That's something that you saw down lower, but then back at AAA.
Yeah, low A was great. The zone's bigger. You can challenge a pitch that's off the plate and get it called strikes. And then there's AAA, and the guys really know the zone, and the zone's a little smaller. And, you throw a pitch that's pretty good, and you're like, that looks like a strike. And the kid taps his head, and it's a ball. And you're like, all right, well, thanks, buddy. So, no, again, that's just a different challenge. And it works both ways, right? We can challenge. They can challenge. They seem to win more challenges as hitters just because, they kind of have a little more free reign. And as pitchers, especially a starter, you're not going to challenge a pitch in the first inning or the second inning just because if you do miss, I think you get 2 challenges, maybe 3. So the risk reward there as a starting pitcher isn't quite there. And, I mean, it is what it is. It holds people accountable at the end of the day. And that's all you can really ask for as a competitor.
All right, one more. My girlfriend has a 9-year-old. We play a lot of board games.
Cool.
You dominate those?
Yeah.
What is a game that I can dominate the 9-year-old at?
Catan for sure.
Okay.
Catan's tough, a lot of strategy, a lot of thinking. You know, I would say it's probably like an older person game because there is so much strategy and thinking, and there's trade involved, which also makes it a different beast in itself because, you know, you'll realize like some resources are really scarce versus some are really plentiful. So if you're really looking to beat up a 9-year-old in a board game, I would probably go with Catan.